Are we moving on to the sexiest position in fantasy football now, or what?
Absolutely. The bow tie is ready.
Love that. Look, that's dapper.
I
Uh,
hated it.
all right, so we're moving into the running backs, Ty, and this top group is one that we talked about recently on one of our episodes when we talked contract running backs. We
The
got
holdout
Dalvin.
boys.
Yeah, the holdout boys. That's right. Boys with a Z for effect as well. You got to put the Z on there. Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, and Joey Mixon. Who you got?
Okay, so I have Alvin Kamara as everything. No,
Yeah.
I guess we can't do that. That's cheating. So I'll take let's go Alvin Kamara for Dynasty. Let's go Dalvin Cook for redraft, and I'll fade Joe Mixon. What's new? I know I take a lot of heat for that one, but it's a tough decision, and I just think it's pass catching, right? Like I think Dalvin Cook with as so long as Stefanski left, but as long as Kubiak, with his promotion to full-time offensive coordinator, I think he's just going to use Dalvin Cook up. But I do think when it comes to Dynasty, Alvin Kamara, the upside, the top 5 potential, the 81 catches every season is just so appetizing that I can't not have him as a top 5 asset in startups. I really can't. How do you have those guys?
Yeah, a little bit different. I actually have Alvin Kamara is my redraft choice. Dalvin Cook is the fade. And Joe Mixon is my dynasty pick. I love Joe Mixon. And I think it was really tricky between him and Kamara because, like you said, I think Kamara could be all three of these. Like, Kamara is, I want Kamara in dynasty as well. And I think for me, what it kind of boiled down to is the fact that I think Mixon has the safe carry floor, and I do think that he is going to get the pass catching here. So I think with Mixon, it's really tricky, much like an article that you wrote recently. Everybody check out
Why do you
True.
think
Go
why do you
ahead.
think he's going to get the pass catching? Everyone says he's going to get the pass catching, but why do you think that?
I think he's the best skill position player in this offense. Joe Brady has shown that he can scheme up a pass catching running back, and Joe Burrow has shown that he can throw to the running back effectively. So I think, yeah, he's just the best. He's somebody who they're going to want to use to insulate their rookie quarterback. I think Joe Mixon's it, man.
Yeah, actually, I have Joe Mixon ahead of Dalvin Cook in Dynasty, but I just don't see why he didn't get the pass catching last year, why he didn't get it the year before. So I don't want to just heap it on him now all of a sudden when this team will accommodate the other Joe Burrow, the first overall pick. I
That's
just think they're
right.
gonna they're gonna run a lot. This is a super pass heavy team. And it was shocking to me that Joe Mixon had such low market share in the first year under Zach Taylor last year. It was really disheartening. And
Mhm.
Gio Bernard's still there. They drafted Travion Williams. They drafted Rodney Anderson. So I just don't see them heaping 90% of the snaps on Joe Mixon. I don't see them heaping this pass catching work. It's really been frustrating. And I urge people to check out that article. I think I really
Yeah.
make a compelling argument that we can't just gift people work. And this guy needs to fucking pay off his ADP before we can start being in love with Joe Mixon. It's been 3 years, man. And I have him as my 6th overall running back in Dynasty, and it pisses
Mhm.
me off.
I would say that his situation hasn't been necessarily stellar the last couple of years. He has got the safe carries, but it's been a bad offensive line and an offense that's needed some turnover. But I totally see your point, and I loved that read. That was definitely a good read. So anybody that wants to check that out, go to TrueNorthFFB.com and look for it. It was if what was the title of it, Ty? It was pretty clever.
I don't know, something about give Joe Mixon the pass catching or don't draft him.
Yeah, or
Like
pass
if
on
you
him.
think
That's
he's
right.
going to get 10% market share, then draft him, but actually do the thought process and determine why you think he's going to get 10% market share, even though, because guys, I think people are underestimating how much Joe Mixon has crushed it on the ground. The guy's over 1,100 yards rushing back-to-back seasons. He is literally just crushing the league in goal line carries and red zone carries, although he's barely been a running back one for fantasy owners, and we've drafted him as a back-end running back one. So it's just
Mhm.
crazy to me.
I think though, I mean, give the guy like 70 targets and he can return that back end running back one, with all that
But
efficiency
Joe,
on the ground,
But even
add
without
70
AJ
targets.
Green and as one of the pass heaviest teams in football with the worst game scripts, like everything was a confluence of events that
Mhm.
should have precipitated that last year, and it didn't. And Gio Bernard is still there. Travion Williams is there. Rodney Anderson is there. AJ Green is still there, and he wasn't there last year. And they brought in T Higgins. They bring in a new quarterback who, yeah, he passed a lot to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he also ran a ton of zero back sets. And
Mhm.
you know, I just want to see Joe Mixon be the guy who split out wide in those four wide receiver packages, because I do think we'll see a lot of zero running back sets in Cincinnati with Zach Taylor, and I just think 70% of the targets will always go to the wide receiver position in this offense.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to watch because people are drafting him in dynasty startups at like the mid to back end of the first. So definitely a hefty price tag on Joe Mixon. Real quick, just to whip off that other group, I think Alvin Kamara with that redraft choice of mine. I just think this offense is just set to explode this year. Drew Brees is coming back healthy. They brought in Emmanuel Sanders, who is definitely a capable option at the wide receiver 2 spot, which we haven't seen a whole lot of in New Orleans. And then obviously Michael Thomas is going to be the focal point for any defense. So that Saints offense is just looking set to blow. And then Dalvin Cook's the fade just because I think the injury history, of course, is a factor for him. And I just think the rumblings and the fact that I think he really needs to be in one of these high volume rushing offense to be what he was last year. And if there's a chance that he's not necessarily there next year, I'm not sure that somebody's going to give him that entire workload with that injury history that he's got. So Dalvin Cook's my fade there.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on Alvin Kamara really quick. The reason I'm so high on him in Dynasty is because I don't see a lot failing for him so long as he was to re-sign with the Saints, because that offensive line is so elite, so potent. I have so much faith in Sean Payton as a coordinator, and we've seen them sort of transform this offense in the last 3 years into just a rushing juggernaut, and they score at a very high pace. And since coming into the league in 2017, nobody has been more efficient for fantasy than Alvin Kamara. Well, actually, that's not true. Austin Eckler has been slightly more efficient than Alvin Kamara, but as a full body of work, introduce some volume, and Alvin Kamara's 1.22 points per touch when it comes to fantasy football is just ridiculous since 2017.
Yeah, real quick, Ty, just to correct a mistake that I made there when I was talking about Joe Mixon, I said Joe Brady. I totally forgot. Joe Brady didn't come up with Joe Burrow. He came up with Matt Rule in Carolina. But I do like the Zach Taylor offense in Cincinnati. They were really good at the beginning of the season, and he's been a part of offenses that have had really prolific running backs as well. So that was just a little bit of a boo-boo on my part.
Good catch. Producer must have been in your ear there.
Yeah,
I didn't even catch it.
Absolutely.
I would have been all over that like a kid on a ham. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a big difference, in my opinion, between Joe Brady and Zach Taylor when it comes
Yeah.
to scheming running backs, creative route running from the running back position, because Joe Brady is a disciple of Sean Payton or the New Orleans Saints. So I think it's definitely a distinguish, something like that. We have to distinguish between the two.
Distinguish. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
I see that. Why don't you fly into the next group, Ty?
Okay, so this group is a really fun group, I think. So I have Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, and Josh Jacobs. Who is the outlier of this group? Who is the running back one? Give me everything.
You want it all, hey? I think Derrick Henry in himself is an outlier. Just to start off with that, as the guy who's not going to be getting a whole lot of target share, but I still have Derrick Henry as the redraft choice. Nick Chubb is the dynasty choice, and Josh Jacobs is the fade for me. So it's to start with Derrick Henry, who I spoke about as the redraft choice. I just think this offense with Ryan Tannehill re-signed, with the passing offense looking very condensed, like Jonnu Smith and AJ Brown are the only pieces I want in that passing offense. I think this offense has to run through Derrick Henry. So I think that fat carry total, and that's fat with the PH, that fat carry total is going to be there for him. I think, high touchdowns are just built in with Derrick Henry. That's not to say like you're projecting like 14 touchdowns, but I think just his profile and the way they use him really breeds those potential double-digit touchdown seasons. So I think he's my redraft choice. I think Nick Chubb's the long play for me. He's the dynasty guy. I know you love Nick Chubb as well. And I just think with Kareem Hunt there and having a role this season, he wasn't going to be my redraft choice, Nick Chubb. He's going to be the dynasty choice, because if Kareem Hunt is not there after this season, Nick Chubb has shown in the first half of last season that he can be a good pass catcher. And we know he is just all world when he's running the ball. So Nick Chubb's the dynasty choice. And then Josh Jacobs is the fade, just because I wasn't going to take him for redraft, because I'm a little bit questionable about that target share. Obviously last year it sucked, and we really want to see that unlocked for him. But the re-signing of Jalen Richard and the drafting of Lynn Bowden was a little bit a little bit telling there in that we may not be able to bank on them unlocking that because the other pieces around there. And I think I wasn't going to choose Josh Jacobs for the Dynasty play because I like Nick Chubb a lot more than Josh Jacobs for Dynasty. So that's kind of where I am sitting. So Ty, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Dino redraft or fade?
Yeah, so I'll get out of the way. Derrick Henry will be my fade. Nick Chubb's always my everything. Who did my 98 degrees? Totally over. I don't know if they're overrated or underrated, but they're a boy band.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Who was the lead guy in that one? They're
It
no
was
O Town or Soul Decision, but they're like,
it was Nick
they're up there.
Lachey, obviously.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
So
Some boy
So
band moves there.
Derrick
Sorry.
Henry, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs. So I faded Derrick Henry. This is a weird one because I'll have to go. Actually, you know what? I guess I have to go Derrick Henry and redraft and fade Josh Jacobs because I'm
Okay.
so high on Nick Chubb in all formats.
Samesies.
So
We're
Derrick Henry
samesies.
is.
Sorry.
So I do have him as a top 10 running back in redraft. He's my running back like 15 or so in Dynasty, though. It's just somebody I don't look at a lot in startups. Nick Chubb is my running back. He's a top 10 running back in all formats for me. And I almost want him over Derrick Henry in all formats. Everything Derrick Henry gives you, Nick Chubb does too. He's just an unbridled superstar, in my opinion. And redrafting rankings certainly lend a Kareem Hunt's presence for Nick Chubb and his possible league-winning upside in that offense, Kareem Hunt. But in the long term, as a talent, Nick Chubb is the man, top 5 in the NFL. And dead serious, the broken tackles, the big plays, the yards after contact, that is Nick Chubb's jam. And unlike Derrick Henry, he doesn't need to be at full speed or in the fourth quarter to pull it off. And then, Josh Jacobs, you mentioned it. He's the poor bastard whose team re-signed Jalen Richard. They drafted Lynn Bowden and smashed it home that he'll be used as a running back predominantly. And they also have breakout wide receiver Hunter Renfrow, super stud Darren Waller. And because of who and what their quarterback Derek Carr is, Henry Ruggs has to factor in here too when it comes to yards after the catch, short average depth of targets, everything just fighting against them. And all these players, they'll be used close to the line of scrimmage. All those players in Oakland, it really are in Las Vegas, and all of them put a huge cap on Josh Jacobs' fantasy upside. I think Josh Jacobs is a running back 1 in Dynasty still, just on that cusp. But even in startups, I'm probably low on him as my running back 11. Running back 14 and redraft might be low too for Josh Jacobs, and he likely ends up landing in that running back dead zone, so I won't have a lot of them. But I still have a lot of interest in Jacobs if I can land him. If I can land like a pass catcher and running in round 1, if I have a Kamara or something like that on my roster and Josh Jacobs falls to me, that's when he becomes very interesting. But I think it's really cool. I wanted to put these guys together because there's such a theme here. They're all elite tackle breakers when it comes to Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs. They're just elite in that tackle breaking department. And they all do that thing where they put up the yards after contact as well. And that equates to big plays.
I think they all have question marks as far as target volume. So definitely a great group to put together there. I actually have Josh Jacobs in Dynasty at running back 12, and in redraft, I have him at running back 13. And then Derrick Henry is kind of right around there as well. So all these guys are pretty close. And I think Nick Chubb is the clear-cut winner as far as the upside department. So next group, Ty, it's got one of your boo-boos in there. Sorry, that was weird.
Just really quick, I think that was perfect that you said that. I just want to hop on that group really quick, like the Derrick Henry, Chubb, like that's what I was saying about outliers. Like every year, statistically, only 1 or 2 guys who doesn't get 40 catches, doesn't get 60 targets, whatever you want to look at for running back 1s in fantasy. That's why these guys end up being outliers, and usually only 1 or 2 of them statistically will finish as a running back 1. So it's just disheartening to look at how talented those 3 guys are and know that only 1 or 2 of them probably finish as a running back 1.
Totally. I like that. Yeah, Derrick Henry.
And I like Aaron Jones.
Yeah, that's your boo-boo. So I guess that's a good way to get into this next group. The next group, there's a lot of questions about these guys as well. Some long-term future questions, some usage questions. So obviously Aaron Jones is one of them. Old Kenny Drake in Arizona is another one, and Austin Eckler in Los Angeles is the third. So Aaron Jones, Kenyon Drake, Austin Eckler. Ty, where are you at with those 3?
Okay, I might work through this one a little slower because this one was probably the toughest for me, I'd say. I mean, Aaron Jones, he's going to be my Dynasty guy. I'm standing behind this guy, and it has nothing to do with all my shares in Dynasty of him. no bias here whatsoever. But he rounds out my running back ones grouping for redraft right now as well. He's my running back 12. I also have him as my running back 12 in Dynasty. So he's a polarizing guy because of his contract status, and he really walks that fine line at the position that is so devalued. The writing seems to be on the wall so far as the Packers drafting A.J. Dillon, but with all the going-ons in Green Bay, LaFleur, everything is pointing towards the run game, and I think Aaron Jones is the greatest. And I think for Dynasty, the worry, the concerns everybody has, it might be going too far. He may not have the same draft capital or the same standing with his team compared to the Mixons or Dalvin Cooks of the world, but he's been just as successful as those guys for fantasy owners. And by just, I mean way more successful than those guys. Top 5 running backs in PPR fantasy points per touch over the last 3 years since he came into the league. I mentioned Austin Eckler. I mentioned number 2 was Alvin Kamara. Number 3 is Christian McCaffrey. Number 4 is Aaron Jones. He's been unbelievably efficient, and on a per carry basis, on a per touch basis, for fantasy, he's been top 6 across the board since coming into the league. And my favorite part about Aaron Jones is he puts up those ultra big weeks. He stung a couple times last year, but he also won you the week several times. He actually had 2 of the top 6 performances by a running back in fantasy last year. And then let's go to Kenyon Drake, because I think that was my toughest decision, because these 2 guys I think can really blow up. You know what I mean? He's my guy for redraft I picked, which means I'm fading Austin Eckler, which really hurts. But I think the theme of this group, in my opinion, they could all end up as that league winner this season, and none of them need 300 touches to do it, a.k.a. these are the running backs we hammer every year in the second round. We've talked a lot about the team. I think the big question is how robust will the usage be for Kenyon Drake, the snap share, the market share in the passing game. I have high hopes for playing time. I mean, Kenyon Drake played almost 80% of the snaps in his half season with Arizona last year. In the 6 games, both he and DJ played. David Johnson averaged just over 25% of the snaps, almost 80% of the snaps. Very hard to repeat. But I also wanted to mention David Johnson because he played 77% of the snaps weeks 1 to 6. And one encouraging takeaway is that Drake he's just always done great in fantasy so long as he's gotten any volume whatsoever. He has seen 10 plus carries in a game just 19 times in his career, exactly 1/3 of his career games in the NFL. In those 19 games, just 10 carries in a game, Kenyon Drake's averaged over 17.5 points per game in PPR. So, it's pretty impressive what he's been able to do. Do you think Kenyon Drake might be one of the league winners this year because we find him in that back half of the second round? Or where do you stand on these guys?
Yeah, I think this was another really good group. Like you said, a really tough one to choose. Lots of different questions throughout, but lots of talent throughout as well. So I guess you kicked it to me off of Kenyon Drake there. So I'll just talk about him. I think he can be that league winner because you said the 80% snaps is pretty hard to bank on. I think in this offense, especially with the addition of Nuke Hopkins and them trying to improve that offensive line, Kyler progressing just as a starting quarterback in that Cliff Kingsbury offense, I think he doesn't necessarily need that 80% to be super, super efficient. And we know he can pop off a big play at any time. So I love Kenyon Drake. He's my redraft choice. And I think if I knew he was going to be in Arizona long term, he might have been my dynasty choice over Aaron Jones, just because that offense it looked so good last year. He's getting the targets, he's getting a good carry total. And I think if I knew he was going to be there, I'd be all over that. But I just think if he moves on to another team, I could see him being on the pass catching end of a committee. Just because he hasn't had those big blow up seasons yet. So obviously this season will be very telling for Kenyon Drake's future, but I got him as the redraft choice. Aaron Jones, still my dynasty choice as well. I just think the sheer talent, like you said, his efficiency has been fantastic. His red zone efficiency has probably been even better than that per touch efficiency. So the touchdowns are great with Aaron Jones. And if he's getting the ball inside the 20, he's going to be having that nose for the end zone. Even if he moves on too, I think that talent is one that's going to be able to command a workload. And then Austin Eckler is my fade. I actually mentioned it on the British Ballers podcast that I went on. So shout out to Rich and Kev on the British Ballers. Go give them a look. But yeah, Austin Eckler we talked about the outliers as far as rushing volume, no passing volume. I think Austin Eckler is one of those guys who's a bit of an outlier as far as the receiving volume and no carry volume. Now, he was that in the past. He is projecting to have more carries this year, so I can't necessarily say that for sure. But I mean, one or two running backs with under 200 carries usually make it into the top 12 each year. he is the profile that can do that, but that's a little bit harder for me in the way I play for me to rely on. So Austin Eckler's the fade there as well. I'm kind of worried about the target total this year, especially if Tyrod gets extended starting time, which I think he will. I'm worried about whether Tyrod's going to lean on Austin Eckler in the passing game or if he's going to lean on just breaking out for a run and trying to get some yards himself. So that's why Austin Eckler is the fade for me. But yeah, that was a tough group, dude. Really tough group.
Yeah, I have Eckler as a fade too. I think it's interesting because you mentioned Kenyon Drake and how much higher he would be. And I think my dynasty rankings also reflect how high I'm on Aaron Jones, because both Aaron Jones and Kenyon Drake are unemployed for 2021, right? Whereas Austin Eckler is under contract for multiple seasons. So, sometimes that weighs into our decision making in dynasty, especially at the running back position that has so much turnover, so much volatility. And speaking of that, I think, we are having some turnover and volatility in the sense of what a running back is, what an outlier is. And I think it's a very fine line between a James White and a Tariq Cohen and a completely unique running back the fantasy world has never really seen. And I think Austin Eckler is pretty close to that. And I think, all the talk about the offense is why his ADP is suppressed. It's why he is a fade for me. They won't lead the league in running back targets this year. Tyrod and Justin Herbert both scale back our expectations, no doubt. But the fact the former running back head coach is showing confidence in Austin Eckler, meaning they let Melvin Gordon walk, drafted just Joshua Kelly. And I know like a 3-man running back by committee is what we should see in LA. But my point is Eckler is probably the easiest way to get fantasy points in the history of fantasy football ever. I mean, he's running back 12 across the past 2 seasons. He's played under 50% snaps. He doesn't get a lot of touches. And over those 2 years among running backs, he is number 1 in yards per route run, number 2 in yards after the catch, number 2 in first down catches, number 2 in explosive passing plays. So, and you mentioned like last year he had 300 plus fantasy points on fewer than 600 rushing yards. That was the first time that's ever happened in the history of the NFL. But also leading the league in fantasy points per touch since entering the league, like I mentioned earlier in the episodes. I just think he's a guy that you don't really need to get very many touches for. So I don't really worry about Austin Eckler. And if the hate goes too far, I could see this group kind of interchanging. But my whole point is all 3 of these guys, I think, should be they should be pretty big targets in our fantasy drafts. And all these guys, the only reason they're not higher in our rankings when it comes to dynasty is they have uncertainty for 2021, I think, or some uncertainty. And Eckler, we're pretty sure will be on a Chargers team with a stellar defense and a growing offense, possibly with a very dangerous rushing quarterback in front of him if Justin Herbert pans out. So I think this group is really awesome because they all present the ability to be league winners, but I think they also have sort of a lot of downside when it comes to how much you have to spend on them for dynasty, right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think a little bit pricey. And I think part of the issue just with them being ranked a little bit differently is the influx of new talent as well. Like for Dynasty, I have the top 3. I have Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and J.K. Dobbins above all 3 of these guys for Dynasty. So I think if you can catch a little value on them for people kind of thinking that route, I think they're going to pay off. But when you're starting to get up into like the top of the second round, I don't think I can really buy that quite yet for these guys. Mid to back is where I'm starting to look at them. And it also depends on where you went in the first round there as well. So an interesting crew and a lot of uncertainty, like you said, but a lot of upside with those guys.
What about, do you have your rankings up in front of you there, Trav?
I do. Are we going to look at Dyno or Redraft?
I just want to know for Dynasty, do you have Akers and DeAndre Swift ahead of Austin Eckler?
No,
or any of them?
I have Austin Eckler at 16, not ahead of any of them. So I have Aaron Jones in Dynasty is my running back 13. Kenyon Drake is running back 14, and Austin Eckler is running back 16. So I got Akers at 19 for Dynasty and DeAndre Swift at 23. So I've got those two just a little bit behind, but that could definitely change depending on the contract situations for
totally. It's so hard.
Jones
Yeah.
and Drake. Yeah. It's a really tricky one to decipher.
And I think those are really tough decisions personally that I always struggle with in a dynasty startup draft. And so when you do your dynasty rankings, Trav, are you ranking them as if you're kind of drafting a startup team? Are they value based? Like how do you kind of attack your dynasty rankings, like philosophically?
Yeah, kind of like you said, like who I would take ahead in a draft.
Me too. Yeah, I kind of do the same. So if I could just run mine really quick here, just so you know. I have Aaron Jones as my running back 12, Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins at 14, Cam Akers at 15, Kenyon Drake at 16, Austin Eckler at 17, and then DeAndre Swift. So I have them like really tightly packed there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I wouldn't take Kenyon Drake or Austin Eckler over Cam Akers or Dobbins, just because of what I can expect in 2020. It's really interesting,
Right.
those kind of debates you got to make.
Mm-hmm. And it depends kind of what team you're trying to build, right? Are you trying to win now, or are you
Or
trying to
who
have
you
a
took in the first, yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's really big is who you took in the first round, but definitely an interesting crew. You're higher on Akers than I thought you would be actually.
Yeah, stupid McVay.
No, man, I
He's
can
so
see it
good.
actually. I can see it when I was looking through the show sheet here, and kind of peeping the Rams offense. I think, there's mega opportunity for him, so I don't mind it.
Yeah, and you know me, like I'll whine and bitch and moan, and then I'll just sneak him up my rankings as the
Yeah.
time goes by.
Then you'll snipe him in a draft right after pissing and moaning about him.
And I'll still make sure I got Daryl Henderson on that team. I
Yeah,
think it's still a team
yeah,
that I'm interested in multiple running backs maybe.
totally, man. I like that backing up Cam Akers with Daryl Henderson just in case.
So speaking of backups, let's talk about some guys who could be backups in 2 years. I'm telling you, The Forgotten. Do you ever see that movie? Very strange movie starring
No.
Julianne Moore. Really,
Oh,
really weird stuff.
I haven't.
But this is the Poisonous Apple group. I think the Race to Fade group for me. So I have Leonard Fournette, Todd Gurley, and Melvin Gordon. Who do you got? Who do you got? Who do you got? Who do you not got?
Yeah, well, we mentioned that the last group, Jones, Drake, and Eckler, was a really hard group, but I think that was a hard group in a positive way. This group,
Mhm.
for Fournette, Gurley, and Gordon, was a hard group in like a greasy kind of way,
Yeah, I'll
just
phrase it like this really quick, Trav. It's like a not process over results kind of group. Like whoever blows up out of this group, I will not call it process over results,
yeah,
really.
no, I don't
Maybe
think so.
Gurley.
Yeah, maybe Gurley. Yeah, I can see that. So, to lay out the Dino redraft and fade, I've got Fournette as my fade, Todd Gurley as my redraft, and Melvin Gordon as my dynasty choice. Yeah, I got Fournette as the fade just because I think if he goes elsewhere, which is looking like what the tea leaves are telling us, Ty, I think he could end up on the banger side of a committee because I don't think anyone's going to be giving him the targets he got last year. I think that was kind of a one and done thing that we're going to see for Fournette.
Chris
Um,
Thompson.
yeah, Chris Thompson for all 6 games that he's going to be there is going to be awesome.
Wow.
Okay, we'll give him 8. We'll give him 8.
I'm
I
with
know
you. I'm with you.
I love Chris Thompson. I really like Chris Thompson. I
And
think.
I love those players in redraft because we're gonna draft guys late and drop them anyway. So may as well
Mhm.
grab guys like him,
Yeah.
Deshaun Jackson, your boy. Yeah.
Yeah, no need head to Deshaun Jackson. You see that. You see that. But yeah, Fournette's the fade for me. Gurley is the redraft choice. And this was kind of a gross one. Like I flip-flopped on these guys. If Gurley had like a 2 or 3 year deal in Atlanta, I'd probably go Gurley over Melvin Gordon, to be honest. But I don't know what the future is going to hold for Gurley. And I do think he is going to get an uptick in work in Atlanta in comparison to what he got overall volume in LA last year. So I think Gurley's the redraft choice just because I think he could get 80 plus targets in that offense. And yeah, I mean, Devonta Freeman got 70 last year and 184 carries. So I think that's probably the most work I want to see Todd Gurley get is maybe like 80 plus targets and then 180 to 200 carries. If he's getting more, I think that's going to be rough on the knee, but that's why Gurley's my redraft choice. For Melvin Gordon, I just think the backfield in Denver looks like it could clear up maybe as soon as training camp with the potential for maybe Philip Lindsay or Royce Freeman to get traded or whatever. Obviously, it's hard to bank on a trade, but it looks like somebody's got to go in that backfield to me. And I think with Drew Lock not yet proving that he's somebody you're going to put the team on his back yet, I still do think even with the wide receiver additions that they're going to try and lean on the run game. Their offensive line was pretty good in the run game last year as well. So I think Melvin Gordon can still have a couple good years in Denver with that offensive line and with his red zone prowess too. I think if he's getting the totes in the red zone, he's going to be able to convert with some tutties.
Yeah, and I actually have this all exactly the same as you. Leonard Fournette's my fade. Todd Gurley redraft. Melvin Gordon for dynasty. I thought it was actually really easy for me
Yeah.
to sort this one out, at least for my personal feelings. And I think redraft it was a little difficult, and I think you could even make an argument for Fournette and redraft. Leonard Fournette and Gurley, they both have a chance to blow past their ADP. I totally admit that. I think actually Fournette might be more likely to do it like I would give him the best odds from this group to finish as a running back 1. Gurley, though, in my opinion, he's the one who could really explode considering his ADP, and it's because of that
Mhm.
pass catching work you mentioned for sure. Really, the fact that Fournette and Gurley land right on that like top 15 running back cusp for me really pisses me off. It's kind of alarming, to be honest, because these are running backs I usually avoid in fantasy, like the profile of players that they are. But I do subscribe to trying to get multiple running backs inside your top 15 to start a fantasy draft. Melvin Gordon I have as my running back 20 in redraft, which is really weird. And he sort of marks the guy I'm willing to be wrong on this year, I guess. Very
Mhm.
low ownership in best ball. I'll have 0 shares in home leagues when I see how much, just because I didn't notice until now really how much lower I was on him. When I talk Dynasty, though, these are guys in my rankings that really show how I attack startup drafts. And that's why I was asking you earlier about how you kind of attack your rankings,
Mhm.
because all of these guys are in between running backs 20 and 25 in my Dynasty rankings. I doubt I'm like outrageously low on them, but
Nope.
if you look at my overall rankings, the running backs who are shoved way down because I'll be hammering the wide receiver in that range of startup drafts.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to you on Dynasty as well. I have Melvin Gordon at 18 right now. I have Todd Gurley at 20 and Leonard Fournette at 21. So yeah, I think we're pretty in line for those guys as far as Dynasty goes. And just yeah, like I said, kind of a gross group to have to go through just because there's reasons to fade all three of these guys, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's go to 3 more guys here, and these are some more exciting guys. Nobody's really fading these players, but should they be in redraft? Should they be in dynasty? So I have J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, and before you say another rookie in your head, I actually threw Kareem Hunt in here.
I like it. I like it. He's still a young running back, right? Kareem Hunt's going to be
I
25 in 2020, I think. So still some youth
and I
there.
think these guys have huge ceilings. Like I think these are guys who,
Oh
if you
yeah.
stab on them in redraft, if you stab on them in dynasty, especially, these guys have big, big ceilings.
Yeah, dude. I think this is a really good group. For me, J.K. Dobbins is the dynasty choice. Cam Akers was unfortunately the fade, but that to me it was just because of how much I like Kareem Hunt, who is my redraft choice. I just couldn't put Kareem Hunt over J.K. Dobbins on the Dino scale just because I'm huge on J.K. Dobbins. I have Dobbins at 11 in Dynasty, and I think just for him, it's the the upside that he has with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is going to draw a lot of attention. J.K. Dobbins is going to have volume after this year. He's going to have big playability and he's going to have touchdown upside. And alongside an offense who is so committed to the run game because of the quarterback that they have, I don't think Mark Ingram is a long-term member of this roster. Let's say I think he's probably got 1, maybe 2 years left, but if he's in there next year, I think Dobbins is probably going to be the featured guy. So I think I'm tempering expectations for Dobbins for this year because Ingram is going to be that guy, but Dobbins for the future is just wheels up. He's just a hair behind that JT and Clyde tier for the rookies for me. So J.K. Dobbins is a dynasty choice. And then for fade, I really like Cam Akers' situation, but he is the fade for me because I do like Kareem Hunt a lot. We have seen the Rams give a full workload to a running back, but we did see last year a muddy situation. So that was kind of the kicker for me. And then for Kareem Hunt, he's my redraft choice because I think he could be a top 15 running back in this Browns offense, even alongside Nick Chubb, because I think he's going to get better rushing volume than he got last year, and he will be the primary pass catching back. And we really hope that we see him in the slot this year. So Kareem Hunt was my redraft choice, but it was very close to him being a dynasty choice with J.K. Dobbins.
So you still got your rankings up in front of you for redraft here and dynasty. I want them both up.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any of these guys as top 24 running backs in redraft?
Okay, Dobbins, Akers, and Hunt. Sorry, I just got to find the names here. Yeah, Hunt is my 21. Akers and Dobbins are a little bit outside. No, I got Akers at 31, but that might be a little bit low, and I got Dobbins at 34, which I'm okay with for
Yeah, so I
redraft.
have all these guys right at that RB2 cusp. I have one of them only inside my top 24 running backs. In Dynasty, I have all 3 of these guys as running back 1s or 2s. Actually, I have them all 3 as running back 2s. So
Mhm.
do you have all 3 of these guys as top 24 in your Dynasty ranking?
Oh yeah, like I said, I got J.K. Dobbins, the Dob Goblin at running back 11. I have Kareem Hunt at running back 17. I could potentially see that switching or changing with him going up a little bit, but not just yet. And then I have Cam Akers at 19 for Dynasty. So yeah, all inside the top 24, and I think they all have top 12 upside.
Totally, me too. And I still think like I love Kareem Hunt, love his talent, still don't love the situation for redraft or for dynasty because there's so much uncertainty heading into 2021. Such a saturated running back market, such a strong 2021 draft class at the running back position. And, I know we've been saying since this offseason started that Kareem Hunt, should he stay in Cleveland, will be used out of the slot, blah, blah, blah. Rashad Higgins, all these things that kept happening. They're not adding any big slot wide receivers, but we also have to worry how often a slot wide receiver is actually in the formation when we think of all the 12 personnel coming in Cleveland. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting tier because they're all guys that have sort of that league winning potential when it comes to redraft, especially Cam Akers and Kareem Hunt. But J.K. Dobbins plays in such a dynamic offense that we saw what Mark Ingram was able to do in under 50% snaps. But yeah, we really like these guys for Dynasty, especially Dobbins and Akers. I want to go to really, sorry to blow past here, but I want to go to this really kind of,
That's cool, buddy.
A polarizing kind of group of guys here. So these guys all make their bread on the ground. They haven't had a ton of pass catching upside, but they also have some very intriguing aspects to make them really big fantasy assets in the future. So Raheem Mostert, David Montgomery, and Devin Singletary. How do you have those guys?
Yeah, so this, for some reason, I just didn't like this one. There's just a little bit of a stench around it for me. I don't know exactly why. Not like super high on any of these guys as far as situation, but I do like the players. Raheem Mostert was the redraft choice for me. I think that offense, we talked about it a little bit on the jam session. You actually opened with it on the jam session because we were talking a little bit of Niners to start. And I think this offense is set to run the ball a ton. The Devo injury is definitely going to help in them skewing that way a little bit. And I think Raheem Mostert is looking like the lead back out of what's probably going to be another three-headed monster, but he's going to be an efficient head of a three-headed monster. Sorry, that was really tough to say, but he's I think Raheem Mostert's going to have a lot of efficiency this year, a lot of touchdown upside. I think you mentioned that the Niners were one of the teams who ran the most inside the 20 or inside the 5, I think you've said before. So I really like the thought of that for Raheem Mostert. David Montgomery was the dynasty choice for me. And the reason for that is because we haven't seen the pass catching for him unlocked. I think we've both talked about how we don't like him if he's not getting that pass catching work, but I think he has a bit of a path for some pass catching to unlock. Tariq Cohen is in a contract year, and I think going forward into 2021, if they don't add a scat back, I think David Montgomery could be in line for an increase as far as targets. But I think with Devin Singletary, there's not a lot of running back pass catching baked into that offense. He did get a decent target total last year, but I think I'm not going to project him for a whole lot more than what he did have last year. And then, of course, Zach Moss has come in to take some of that first and second down work. So Devin Singletary is the fade, with David Montgomery being the dynasty choice and Raheem Mostert being the redraft choice. Like you said, not a lot of pass catching in this group, but I think of the three, David Montgomery has the easiest path for some pass catching to be unlocked because there is targets that are going to be going to a running back in that offense. It just so far hasn't been him.
Yeah, I love how you frame that. I think David Montgomery is by far the only one who I could see having the range of outcomes where he is an elite pass catcher at the NFL level. I think he is an extremely good pass catcher. I think it's his best attribute, or at least his most fantasy relevant attribute coming out of college, even more so than the broken tackles because of the yards after contact that I was talking about. But I think you mentioned what I wanted to mention there is that Tariq Cohen is a free agent, and if he is not there in 2021, if they do not add a third down pass catcher, David Montgomery has a lot of ceiling when it comes to dynasty. Raheem Mostert, I think I'll take him in redraft just because of the price. I think I have Devin Singletary, 3 or 4 spots ahead of him, but I really like Devin Singletary's talent. I like him on the ground. I just think Zach Moss coming in really hurts his upside when it comes to what role he's going to play. What Brandon Beane said in the press conference really scares the hell out of me if I'm a Devin Singletary owner. I think the upside is there in the sense where this offense could really run on all cylinders. Josh Allen could not be the best rushing touchdown scoring quarterback since Cam Newton. It's possible that he isn't that player. You know what I mean? It's not outside of, you know what I'm saying? So I think both Devin Singletary and David Montgomery have a lot of potential as a talent. It just entirely depends how David Montgomery's used. And then Devin Singletary, I think it has a lot to do with Zach Moss's health, how good that offense is in Buffalo. And then Raheem Mostert, I think, is the guy I'll take in redraft, though, just because, he could start hot, stay hot, be hot for
Yeah.
fantasy. And I think we'll talk a lot more unsettled backfields, and we're really going to dive in the near future into the San Francisco backfield. So yeah, let's save a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a lot to go through there.
For sure, for sure. And if we knew Raheem Mostert was going to be the long-term answer there, then we might maybe want to talk about him for Dynasty. But I think he's 28 years old, so he's getting up there. And Kyle Shanahan has shown that he's going to churn through these running backs if he doesn't necessarily have an elite option, which he hasn't had yet in San Francisco, which is why I think he's gone with kind of a bevy of guys. But I think if, in the draft next year, if they were to be able to get one of those top tier guys, I think that we might be able to see that volume go a little bit more to one person. So yeah, that was an interesting group because there is, some good talent there, but some interesting situations. So why don't we get on to this next group of running backs, Ty?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So this one's an interesting group, 2 pass catchers and an only running back essentially. So we got Tariq Cohen and James White, who really offer that target volume and that upside in PPR leagues. And then Sony Michel, who I've said before that I think he could potentially have a big touchdown year with them relying on the run game, but obviously he has to stay healthy with that knee looking bad. So why don't you let me know where you got these 3 at, Ty?
Well, I'll start with Sony Michel. I think he could be top 5 in goal line carries and red zone carries and still not finish as a running back 1. I think that whole spike touchdown season is kind of a myth. I mean, we can go back to LeGarrette Blount, which is the season we're all chasing in 2016. He had, 18, 19 rushing touchdowns that year. And I think he was barely a top 10 running back for fantasy that season. It's incredible. And, even you could go back to the last year that we saw no Tom Brady for a full season, whatever season that was with Matt Castle. But all I remember is what's his face? The pass catching running back ended up having a better season than Sammy Morris, who had far more touches that year. So Sony Michel is still my fade. I can't believe I can't remember what's his face. It's driving me nuts. Kevin Falk.
Kevin Falk. That's right.
Yeah, he's the one who ended up scoring the highest, and I think James White is far more locked into that role than Kevin Falk was at the time. And the one thing is James White, Tariq Cohen, I put on this list because all 3 of these guys are really close in my dynasty rankings. They're all just inside my top 3 running backs, top 36. Mm-hmm. And they all are guys that I'm not really targeting in the top 36 in dynasty. I have none of them in my top 36, I don't think. And I think there's arbitrage plays on these guys. So Sony Michel, I'm definitely grabbing Damian Harris. Instead of Sony Michel, James White, I'll make sure I'm grabbing a JJ Taylor at the end of my drafts when it comes to dynasty. So I think there's a lot of ways to attack this. And then I look at Tariq Cohen, who's actually a player I'm targeting in redraft, but I'm expecting Chicago to be, financially incapable of carrying a luxury like Tariq Cohen is in some aspects when you have a David Montgomery on your roster. So I have no idea what's going to happen with Tariq Cohen. I think he has a very wide range of outcomes in Dynasty. Say he gets on a San Francisco 49ers team, like, holy fuck, man, give me Tariq Cohen. But should he be on, the Chicago, let's say he replaces Kareem Hunt in Cleveland and just we all cry, Yeah. So I think this is a really polarizing group. But I am targeting players in specific formats, in specific spots, and I'm also adding arbitrage plays alongside of them. So I think it's a fun group to go through, but it's also a group that can get you in trouble in redraft, I think, or in Dynasty, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. If you think you're going to be able to lean on one of them, I definitely think it could get you in trouble. I actually have Tariq Cohen as the dynasty play. I have Sony as the fade, and I have James White as the redraft. So Tariq Cohen, Tariq Cohen and James White are very similar, profile of players. They're not going to be getting carries. They're going to be getting targets. And I think the kicker for me with those 2 guys was the age. I think Tariq Cohen, if he moves on after this season, is going to go somewhere. And we know that that's his role, much like James White, but we know that Tariq Cohen's younger. He's probably a little bit more electric as well. So I really like if he gets into a good situation where he's going to get some targets, I think definitely Tariq Cohen could pay off his dynasty ADP right now. James White is the redraft choice, and this one was pretty close because it really depends on what you think of the Patriots offense and how these guys are going to be used. So I said that Sony could have a good year, but let me just be clear that Sony having a good year is him maybe sneaking in the top 24. It's not like he's going to be moving up into the top 12 or anything like that. But I do think that with McDaniels there, James White's targets are going to be pretty solid. So I'm going to go James White just for that safety and the fact that I know exactly how he's going to be used and that he will be efficient with his targets. Whereas Sony obviously could shit the bed on all those red zone targets, as well as he could just be hurt and not play. So yeah, James White was the redraft choice and Sony was the fade for me.
Yeah, and I actually have it exactly the same. So let's go to this next group here. And these might be some arbitrage plays on Tariq Cohen and James White. So this next group is a group of pass catchers who are going in the double-digit rounds of fantasy drafts right now. And I think they're going to start moving up as we get into draft season. So I have Duke Johnson, the DJ number 2 in Houston. We have Nyheim Hines, and we have Chris Thompson, the newest member of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, so I realized that I couldn't go all fade on this one, so I did make some selections here. So funny. Duke Johnson is the redraft choice for me. Nyheim Hines is the dynasty choice for me, and Chris Thompson is the fade for me. And it was pretty tricky because we do love Duke Johnson, but I think with his age, I had to go with Nyheim Hines over him. And I think Duke Johnson in redraft could have a path because David Johnson has shown a propensity to get injured at times. He's going to be running it up the gut like 250 times this year if he stays healthy. So he's going to be susceptible to injuries, obviously, David Johnson. So I think Duke Johnson could be one of those guys who could come into a role mid to late season and be a really nice piece for rosters. Nyheim Hines is the dynasty play, and this was a really tricky one because I have had some love for Nyheim Hines before, and I do have a lot of love for Jonathan Taylor, and I think he can command some of those targets, but there is a world where he doesn't command those targets in Indy, and Nyheim Hines is going to be the beneficiary of those targets. So I think Nyheim Hines had to be the dynasty play for me. And Chris Thompson, although I love him, I think he's a great pass catcher, and if he's used properly, I think he could be good. But I think I have a hard time banking on him as being somebody who's going to stay some semblance of healthy. So I got to fade Chris Thompson, but curious to see where you sit on these guys because I know you're a big fan of Duke, so I'm interested to see where you got him at.
Yeah, these guys are all kind of targets in fantasy for me. I think they're kind of zero RB targets and all that good stuff. Duke Johnson's my easy choice for Dynasty because, Nyheim Hines and Chris Thompson, they're kind of third down backs through and through. They don't really have even a satellite back plus kind of label attached to them. Duke Johnson does, and I think he is. There's a scenario that plays out where, like you said, David Johnson fails spectacularly when it comes to rushing the ball in particular. I think that could happen, and in which case, if Duke Johnson can finally get in there, finally get some carries, finally show off what he's capable of, maybe he can be back in Houston as their lead back next year. Whereas Nyheim Hines, I think a lot of his hotness is tied to the fact that Frank Wright likes to throw the ball to the running back position. Phillip Rivers loves to throw the ball to the running back position. And I do like Nyheim Hines. I just think he is very one-dimensional. I think I think he'll be my fade, Nyheim Hines, by the way. I think Chris Thompson will be my redraft. And Chris Thompson is a guy that I will continue to keep moving up my boards, and I've actually just been scooping up shares left and right as my running back 5 and 6, and best ball is just crazy. Leonard Fournette had 100 targets last year, guys. Like, that's all I really need to say. He's reunited with Gruden. Chris Thompson's going to be used very efficiently. He's going to give you some blow-up weeks. It's simple as that. And he's also going to give you some good floor weeks, I think, if you're a zero RB team who's waiting on some of those later, late mid-season payoff running backs that we have at the back end of our running back group.
Yeah, I like it. I like it for sure. The one concern I have about Chris Thompson is just, I don't think he's going to be, used out of the slot at all because LaVisca and Dede Westbrook are going to probably have that on lock. And then Visca, I think, could maybe vulture a little bit of that third down passing work, but it remains to be seen. And we know that Chris Thompson is efficient in that facet of the game. And Jay Gruden did have him in Washington and brought him over. So that says something to me as well. So I think I really like that play as like a running back 5-6 on the roster that could produce some really good PPR value.
Yeah, and if D.D. Westbrook and Chris Conley don't combine for like 200 targets, you know that, like, I just think a lot of the ancillary pieces in the Jaguars will have a lot to do with it. I think early
Mhm,
season, if Chris Thompson's rolling through training camp, I think Gruden loves him, and I
for
love him.
sure.
I love watching Chris Thompson.
Yeah, he's exciting to watch for sure. He gets it out of the backfield and he can definitely make it happen. There was that one year a few years ago where he was just lighting it up. I think he was probably like top 15 running back through the first 8 games, and then of course he got hurt, which was pretty shitty there. But it's going to be an interesting target distribution in Jacksonville this year with old Gardner the Hardener at the helm.
Absolutely, go Gardner.
Hmm